So lately you live in the jungle. I never see you alone, though you need some definite answers. So I thought I might write you a poem. The question to everyone's answer. It's usually found from within, but the truth shit, I fucked it up. Isn't that great? Magnificent. And I practiced that so much.
3, 2, 1, 0.
You cannot subvert an enemy which doesn't want to be subverted. Subversion is the term, if you look in a dictionary or criminal code to that matter, usually is explained as a part of activity to destroy things like religion, government system, political, economical system of a country. Starting from Hollywood movie makers to professors of political science and quote-unquote experts on Soviet affairs, Kremlinologists as they call themselves. No James Bond nonsense. The rest, 85%, is always subversion. Manipulation of terms. We think that subverter is a person who is going to blow up our beautiful bridges. But according to the law and law enforcement systems of the Western civilization, it's not a crime. Subversion can be only successful when the agent of subversion has a responsive target. Subverter is a student who comes for exchange, a diplomat, an actor, an artist, a journalist like myself. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate, and easily observable if you give yourself time and trouble to observe it, which means always a destructive, aggressive activity aimed to destroy the country, nation, or geographical area of your enemy. It's a two-way traffic. United States is a receptive target of subversion.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where if you're the sort of man who enjoys crushing your enemy, seeing him driven before you and hearing the lamentations of his women, come pay a visit today. We've got a bedroll and a tankard of mead with your name on them, and possibly a serving wench if you play your cards right. Just use the promo code #Lamentations for a special 10% discount, and one of our reservation wenches will get you fixed right up. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Here is your decline of Western civilization news roundup for this, the third week of the 10th month of the fourth year of the third decade of the 21st century. Dateline Brussels, Monday, 16 October. Thousands of soccer fans were kept inside Belgium's national stadium for about 2.5 hours, and an international fixture between Belgium and visiting Sweden was suspended at halftime after an incident shortly before kickoff in which 2 Sweden fans were fatally shot by an unknown assailant less than 3 miles from the stadium. Asked for a description of the gunman, local police said, quote, "The suspect is possibly male, possibly female, possibly something else. Who are we to judge? Medium height, medium weight, medium complexion, unknown religion, indeterminate country of origin, possibly from an immigration background, but we won't say anything else that might cause harmful stereotypes to be perpetuated. Just let us know if you see this guy because he is extremely dangerous," end quote. Reached for comment, FIFA president. Come on, you think I'm actually going to look up the name of the president of FIFA? Said, quote, "We here at FIFA are deeply shocked that our great game of soccer would ever be associated with senseless bloodshed and wanton violence because that has totally never happened before. Like, ever." End quote. Dateline Stockholm, Tuesday, 17 October. Everyone's favorite little cuddly doom troll of the apocalypse, Greta Thunberg, took a well-deserved break from getting fake arrested at dumb climate cult protests this week to get herself into a bit of hot water by tweeting out, Xing out, and then quickly deleting her enthusiastic support of and solidarity with the Hamas terrorist monster savage animals who slaughtered innocent civilians by the hundreds a couple of weekends ago. The original tweet read thusly, quote, "Today, we strike in solidarity with Palestine and Gaza. The world needs to speak up and call for an immediate ceasefire, justice, and freedom for Palestinians and all civilians affected," end quote. And then, of course, you've got the obligatory wall of hashtags, your free Palestine, your I stand with Palestine, your stand with Gaza, and so on. And this was accompanied by a video of Greta and her cute little angry doom troll eco-warrior friends holding up placards and shaking their little fists and looking very disapproving, as they often do. But it was another item in the background that caught the attention of some particularly astute viewers, namely a little stuffed octopus that was displayed just to Greta's left. And look, none of us here was born yesterday. If you're making a video attacking Israel and you're using octopus imagery, you're leaning into the anti-Semitic trope imagery just about as non-subtly as it can be leaned into, really, which, of course, is why Greta's people immediately deleted the tweet and made her issue a statement saying, quote, "Anti-Semitism? Me? How dare you?" End quote. Dateline Brussels, again. Wednesday, 18 October. The Belgian and Swedish prime ministers on Wednesday called for better border controls and more coordinated powers in the European Union to expel illegal aliens. After the aforementioned attack that left 2 Swedish tourists dead, killed by an unknown assailant of indeterminate national origin, aged between 15 and 85, height between 1 and 3 meters, religion unknown, possibly just some ordinary Belgian who snapped and went on a shooting spree. You never know. Reached for comment, the Belgian and Swedish prime ministers said through a joint interpreter, meaning he is an expert at interpreting joints, quote, "Look, we both know that mass migration brings nothing but joy and happiness and cultural enrichment, and we would never make any intimation to the contrary because that would be racist. All we're saying is maybe just let us throw out some of the actual terrorists once in a while, maybe, or better yet, don't make us take the terrorists in the first place, because look, maybe this is just us, but we feel like we should be able to have a Belgium versus Sweden soccer match, 2 of the most polite nations of people that exist on this planet, without an orgy of goddamn bloodshed breaking out. If we wanted that, we would just schedule a match against England," end quote. Dateline Sydney, Thursday, 19 October. Maxim Australia is out with this year's 100 hottest women list, and coming in at number 92, making the list for a second consecutive year, is some bloke named Daniel Laidley, a big, gigantic, hulking dude who walks around in ladies' clothes, claiming to be a woman. And when I say big, gigantic, hulking dude, I'm not overstating matters here. I myself am 6'2". I weigh in the mid 180s, and this dude could squash me like a freaking bug. Because of course he could. The dude was a professional Aussie rules football player before switching to his new career as a coach of professional Aussie rules football. A coach who wears a wig and a dress and a big fake set of tits and demands that the world pretend he's a woman. A coach who, according to the editorial board of Maxim Australia, is a more attractive woman than all but 91 other Australian women. Ladies and gentlemen, this reporter knows, I should like to think, a thing or two about Australia. And one of those things I know is that Australia is not a nation of people that suffers from a lack of pretty women. Yet here we are with Maxim, a publication whose whole reason for being is for men to celebrate the splendidness of the female form, declaring that in a country with 12.84 million women in it, 12.8399 million of those women are less attractive than this big hulking dude. And I'm really not overstating this, ladies and gentlemen. If this dude walked up to me in a dark alley, I would hand over my wallet and say, "Sir, I have a family. Please just let me live." And then with my luck, he would beat me to death for misgendering him. Who knows? Dateline London, Friday, 20 October. And speaking of misgendering, the Labour Party says when they take power in next year's elections, as is widely expected to happen, they are going to put forward a bill that makes it a criminal offense to address a person using pronouns that are not their preferred pronouns. But hold on, because it actually gets quite a bit more complicated. The wording of the proposed statute refers to, quote, speech motivated by hatred of a person's gender identity, end do the people who write this stuff really not consider the implications of the policies they seek to advance, or do they know it all too well and they just don't care? So if I'm reading the proposed statute correctly, it's going to be a criminal offense to address someone with the wrong pronouns, but only if you were doing it out of hatred. Not generalized hatred, mind you, but a specific hatred of that specific person's gender identity. So clearly we're in the realm of thought crime here, for we have a hypothetical utterance that is either a crime or not a crime according to the thoughts in the head of the person who is doing the uttering. So best of luck with that, guys. Let us know how that works out for you. Also, brief side note, on a tangentially related topic, the London Metropolitan Police announced on that same day, Friday, 20 October, that people chanting for violent jihad in the various hooray for Hamas rallies that are being held around that city, they will not be investigated for hate speech or for fomenting terrorism by the stated rationale that the word jihad, well, it can have any number of different non-violent meanings. So for those London residents who are keeping score at home, calling someone the wrong pronoun, that is criminal hate speech and will land you in prison. But chanting that you want to wage jihad and wipe Israel off the map, that is protected speech. Please do make a note of it, especially you, Lawrence Fox. We don't want to have to come back and dig through your wife's underwear drawer again. We were just in there last week. There was nothing very interesting. So consider yourself warned. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is your Decline of Western Civilization news roundup for the third week of October in the year 2023. And with that, I send it back to my distinguished colleague, America's favorite cryptozoological phenomenon, my friend and yours, the one and only Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
All right, bud. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know nothing if you don't tell me what's going on. I'd just be totally clueless. Let's get us both up here and do that banter thing. How you doing today?
I'm great. Let's banter, shall we? I love banter, and there's nothing I like more than a bit of pithy banter on a Sunday evening.
Right. Well, I took care of all my laboratory problems before I entered the chat. So
beautiful. That's what professionals do, ladies and gentlemen.
That's what we hear about. Too much information? I can never tell. But listen. There's a meme that I've been waiting to have happen to me that it came to my attention this morning. My wife told me, no one thinks like I do, so no one will ever make the meme. But I seem to believe that I resemble Boris the animal. And no one has mentioned it yet. They always compare me to the dude. I guess I'm just too weird for my own skin, bro.
I'm not seeing that when you actually have a much better voice than Jeff Bridges. I'm not trying to flatter you unduly there. I'm just saying.
That's just your opinion, man.
That's just your opinion, man.
All right, so
I've had a really rough night, and I hate the fucking Eagles.
They don't even permit the Eagles to be mentioned on my channel. They're so anti anything to do with their work, dude. It is amazing. Remember what I told you? Never, ever, ever the Eagles.
Ever.
Ever.
Words to live by.
This is completely God's honest truth. Let's do the whole chat thing. Let's do this thing. Are we giving out trophies today?
Yes.
All right. We're going to go with the Smoking Auditor, who gets the gold. Matthew the King, who gets the silver. And ATL gets the bronze. Welcome in, y'all.
Boom.
Yeah. We got Ajot coming in and doing good work.
It's a murderer's row that would make Jesse Owens and Michael Phelps hang their heads in shame.
Right? Should get out, push. I really don't know who Al is or what his rhythm has to do with my channel, but that cracker needs to start pulling his own weight.
Who are we talking about now?
The algorithm. I don't know who Al is.
Oh,
if I have to,
I got
this. Oh Lord, yeah, no, y'all share this thing, like,
and
share
it. In case anybody hasn't heard the joyous news about the algorithmic change, that YouTube is doing you a solid. They are going to, when you're watching news-oriented content from an independent content creator, they are going to make it even more certain that you get steered toward a more reputable mainstream news source after that video. Just so we can get those bad wrong thoughts cleaned out of your head by some real professionals who do this stuff for a living. So
that reminds me of a joke. Why is a man's mind always dirtier than a woman's? Because she changes hers 3 or 4 times a day. I got another one. How long does it take a woman to change a tire? I don't know. She hadn't got home yet.
I like that one.
All right, I'm done with that. We're going to go into our next segment. What you got for us on the next segment?
I don't know, but if anybody wants to know why I'm wearing these sunglasses,
I'm sure it has something to do with your closet complexion.
it's because maybe I can have it done by Tuesday. The next parody song is an Elton John number. I guess that's why they call it fake news.
Absolutely.
So, and I have already got the sunglasses to wear for it because, of course, I do.
Right. Yeah. I never did the whole costume outfit hipster thing. The best I've currently got going for me as far as Halloween for the past 10 years, I've been the Black Knight. I got me a Freakazoid costume for this year. So hopefully some shorts will come out of that. And I'm not allergic to blue. We'll see. I'm not putting that stuff on me until I figure it out, though. I'm going to put a little dot on me and keep it for like 3 days.
So are we going to talk about Sydney versus Cormoran?
Yep. But my question is, now, this is an excellent channel, and I'll hold on, let me drop that.
Yes, it absolutely is. Anybody who is not subscribed to Ocean Liner Designs should subscribe to it immediately, or I will punch you.
I'm doing that thing right now. I'm putting it in chat currently, so I should have already had it there, to be honest. And that should go to both places, in theory. It should pop up twice over here.
Yep. It's just an absolutely outstanding channel. Everything he does is supremely high quality. It's channels like that are why YouTube is awesome.
Right. Okay. Do you want to do this with the sound and just go through kind of step by step on the timeline? Because they've got it broken down pretty good. So just we'll let everybody kind of see how this goes.
I think maybe for people watching who are less familiar with the topic, maybe just let it play for the first couple of minutes and let them get the broad strokes at least.
I got you. Okay. So in general, we have what Captain Curmudgeon actually gave me the best description I've heard of this. We have what might be the final Age of Sail battle. And it took place during World War II, right? The tactics these people used were absolutely absurd. It involves a German, what do they call them? Counter merchantman?
Commerce raider.
Commerce raider, a German commerce raider off the coast of Australia.
They are disguised as a Dutch merchantman.
Right. And they are being paced more or less by a Australian light cruiser who initially is utterly convinced she's a legitimate commerce ship.
Yep.
And I'm not sure ever cotton to the fact that they weren't actually just shooting warning shots, because it's an absolute absurd battle. It goes nowhere.
Yeah, and if even for as much uncertainty as there still is, if there are any conclusions we can draw, it's that this is, if nothing else, one of the greatest successes of deception in naval combat history. It's almost like a World War II version of the last battle in Master and Commander, the Far Side of the World, where Russell Crowe's ship disguises itself as a whaler in order to close the range with the French enemy and be able to, and then throw off the disguise and be able to shoot the shit out of them.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy of what goes on here. That's pretty much exactly what they do. Welcome in, Swiss Man. It's good to see you.
Hey, Swiss.
So we're going to let them explain how the battle opens up and kind of lay it out themselves. And they use video game footage to reenact the various, or maybe it's CGI. I think it's video game though. I think
Yeah, this is a really solid video. This is probably the best video there is on the subject.
Yeah, it's one of the best. I haven't looked around a whole lot. I come across this one pretty quick and just watched it. It was good. It was really good.
It's a calm afternoon in the Indian Ocean, far off the coast of West Australia. The pride of the Australian Navy, a powerful cruiser, HMAS Sydney, has spotted a lone cargo ship which is acting suspiciously. Sydney draws closer for a look, and before long, the two are sailing side by side at point-blank range. Sydney asks the stranger to hoist the secret signal of a friendly Allied ship, but it hesitates, and then all hell breaks loose.
Feuer frei!
Just how did one of the Australian Navy's most modern and deadly warships sink with the loss of all of its crew? This is the horrifying true story of the sinking of HMAS Sydney. September 1939. War breaks out dramatically in Europe after nearly a decade of rising tension. Adolf Hitler's military pours into Poland, dragging France, Britain, and their allies into a devastating conflict. Before long, Hitler's armies have stormed into Holland, Belgium, France, Denmark, and Norway. But while the heavy fighting is confined to the European continent, the oceans have now become the stage for an epic struggle for survival. The world's glorious peacetime ocean liners are mothballed or converted into drab troop transports for the war effort. Menacing battleships and cruisers prowl the waves, but below them, Germany's U-boat fleet hunts Allied shipping down with frightening prowess. Hitler knows that Britain is an...
All right, that's a good observation. At this point in the war, the German Wolf Brigade is absolutely unstoppable.
Yeah, they're having their happy time, as they referred to it.
They are completely undetectable, untraceable, untrackable, and
Enigma still hasn't been cracked.
Right, exactly. And on top of all that, they don't seek valuable targets to take their cargo. They seek valuable targets to deny the cargo to the enemy.
Yeah. Which is the evolution in submarine philosophy that you had between the First War and the Second War.
Right.
Or at least I guess a big part of that actually happened during the First War, because during the first part of the First War, the practice was for the submarine would approach the target vessel and very politely say, would you put everyone off in boats so we can sink you, please? Or they would say, put everyone off so we can confiscate your cargo. And then
sometimes they take the ship. They just put a skeleton crew and ship it back to port somewhere.
But then by the end of the war, it was especially after Lusitania, it was much less gentlemanly and more they still
took place right there. You had a drastic increase in the size of ships, and during that time period, things went from 168 foot to 400 feet long cargo vessels. Like, there was a significant increase in the tonnage of vessels, and not an equal increase in the ships taking those tonnage. So it was inevitable that cargo was going to the bottom if you don't take the ship itself. And since you can't
also in the Second War, whereas in the First War, submarines were very much surface vessels that could submerge for very brief periods, only when it was absolutely necessary. By the Second War, they were able to run submerged for much lengthier periods of time and attack while submerged, and that really changed the complexion of everything.
Right. And the ability the inability to load up enough crew onto it wasn't a pirate ship, is my point. You weren't dealing with a frigate carrying nothing but food so that they could feed the army they're going to use to board your ship with. It was a totally military, clandestine adventure to go and deprive the enemy of as many material, men, and resources as possible. And the enemy was England. So ships.
Yeah,
Right.
an enemy that is not internally self-sufficient, and if you can interdict enough of his shipping, then you win the war just as a matter of attrition.
Mm-hmm. All right. I just want to go over the distinct difference in tactics that had taken place with the whole submarine warfare thing. There was an increase in ship size along with an increase in crew size, but a decrease in crew size in the submarines. And in some cases, smaller submarines were built because they were less detectable. So,
well, yeah, and the Japanese took that to the most absurd possible endpoint by building single-man submarines.
Well, when you have a combat philosophy that includes the kamikaze, it makes perfect sense. Hello, Izzy. Welcome to the show.
Hi,
I
Izzy.
missed somebody. Northwoods Press, good to see you. Havoc One, good to see you, bud. Smoking Auditor, AJOT, everybody else's I've seen. Okay. I think I got everybody. Wouldn't want anybody to be left out. Right?
I think many of the usual suspects are here.
Yeah. These are my ride or die. They're my squatchaholics. I think Izzy came up with that one. I can't remember who came up with squatchaholics, but it's pretty good. I like it. I think I'm going to go with it. Might give me a t-shirt or something. What's up, country boy? Good to see you, bud. I'm popping in here late. I see how you is. No love. Everybody share stuff. It's fun when you share out Captain Curmudgeon stuff. You get more attractive every time you do it.
It's true. It
Island
is,
nation.
and you do.
All island nations in wartime display the same Achilles heel. If enough supply ships cannot get through, then wide-scale production issues and food shortages are sure to follow. Britain and the Commonwealth, including Australia, Canada and New Zealand, rely on regular supplies from allied nations, and without them, the war effort could grind to a halt. Allied merchant ships are slow and mostly defenceless, but they are numerous, so most of the German Navy's efforts are directed at culling that number, and they do so with remarkable efficiency. U-boats, the German submarines, are adept at this role, and they exact a devastating toll. But there's a problem. They can only carry so much fuel, so they need to operate nearby to friendly submarine bases or where they can be resupplied at sea. Ships, thanks to their size, have a much larger operating range, but a warship like a cruiser or a battleship will be almost impossible to conceal, and operating by itself will be hunted down and destroyed. This happens to the German battleship Bismarck in May 1941. But the German Navy has another weapon up its sleeve, one which proved remarkably effective during the First World War, the Commerce Raider. The concept of the Commerce Raider goes back to the days of sail, when privateers, civilian crewed ships acting under a commission of war, would often disguise themselves as harmless civilian ships before dropping the ruse and attacking an unprepared opponent.
All right, so this is not a new tactic. This is not something that just sprung up off the coast of Australia over there. This has been going on since the Trojan War. I mean, that's basically the same trick.
Yep.
So it's I'm nothing to worry about. I'm just a cute little boat. Look at me fishing. I'm just fishing.
and as long as we have had ships and navies and naval combat, it has been an accepted convention of the sea that you are allowed to run under a false flag just as long as you hoist your true flag before you initiate hostilities. And that's exactly what Cormoran does here. She keeps up the disguise for as long as she possibly can, and when it's unavoidable that she has to start shooting, they hoist that Dutch flag down and they haul up the Kriegsmarine flag, and then it's time to have a Donnybrook, baby.
Do you reckon there was that oh shit moment on the bridge of the Sydney?
Yeah, and it's shocking that moment came so very late as it did.
I've always kind of felt like the captain of the Sydney was utilizing a modern attack pattern without the rest of the unit. You know what I'm saying? Like, he attempted to do his light cruiser thing, but he didn't have the support of the rest of the support ships. So it didn't work.
Yeah, and aside from that, I mean, in the year 1941, how much time do cruiser captains spend training for a single ship action?
No, it's unheard of. That was not
Yeah.
even something that was thought of. You were going to be traveling in convoy, so you're going to be protecting other ships. So why would you even train for a single ship to ship action?
Yeah, and this is really the only engagement of its kind in the entire war, which is what makes it such a fascinating story. I mean, aside from a whole host of other things.
Yeah, there's so many weird things, like the reaction of the Sydney to the idea that this ship might not be legit. There is a long period of like 12 minutes of interchange between the engine room and the captain about what the heck is going on. It has to be, because they changed speed like 3 times during that period, as reported by the Cormoran, and changed direction at least twice.
Yep.
So that is weird. That is just weird. It's like they were having an argument in the bridge as to how to go about attacking, boarding, searching, checking. I don't know. I feel like the decision was made to go and check the ship, to physically go, talk to the captain about why you're doing this.
Yeah, and that's a testament to how successful the camouflage job was, and how
Right.
successful, what a great job the Cormoran's crew did of pretending to be just a bunch of dumbass Dutch merchant sailors. Oh, we don't know what you're talking about. Let us fix our flags, and we got the signal wrong, and and they just they did just enough of that fake dumbassery to get Sydney to come in to close the distance enough to where her advantage was gone, and Cormoran could hit her and she couldn't hit Cormoran.
The decision to go straight at the Cormoran was a really weird one. And in my opinion, looking at the actual top-down view of the battle, looks more like the action of a destroyer actually on the hunt, and less like the action of somebody trying, because he goes full speed, initially he turns away, goes to like 3/4 speed, which I assume was a build up to build up speed, of course, to make him a more difficult target. But then he slows down for some reason and starts turning back into it nose on. He goes nose on almost straight at him for most of this conversation, and then goes slightly askew, starboard, I believe. And at that point, they throw off the charade, and everything goes slam to hell in a bucket really, really quick.
Yep. And they hoist up the real flag and uncover the guns, and
it's all like Donkey Kong.
And they've actually got the same size of main battery. The Sydney has got, I think, 8 6-inch guns, and Cormoran has got 6 6-inch guns. But because the Sydney's guns are permanently emplaced on an actual warship, they have slightly more range than the ones on the converted Commerce Raider. But so that's why, even though the caliber is the same, the Cormoran gained an advantage by the Sydney closing the distance to where her shots were going over the adversary, and the adversary's shots were plowing right into her side.
And you know good and well that German captain was sitting there going, just a little bit closer.
Oh, I know. Yeah, seriously. Yep. Hold on, just a little bit closer. Wait till you can see the whites of their eyes, boys.
I want to see the sweat beading on their brow. Get them, boys.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
The strategy played within the rules of war, so long as the disguise was dropped before attacking the enemy, and so long as the disguised ship flew its national ensign just before attacking. The concept was refined further during the First World War by both Germany and Britain, the latter famously deploying Q ships, which looked like innocent cargo vessels but carried hidden guns. To the German Navy, the Commerce Raider was an ideal tool to rely on to hunt down and destroy Allied merchant ships outside of the range of the U-boats, and one of their raiders was named Cormoran. Cormoran had started life in 1938 as the Steiermark, built as a passenger cargo ship for the Hamburg America line. The ship was meant to operate as far as East Asia from Europe, but before she could ever enter service, the war had broken out, so the new ship sat idle. The Kriegsmarine, or the German Navy, had been secretly preparing for war during the 1930s. Limitations put on the German Navy after the First World War meant that their number of conventional warships, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and the like, was much lower than the Allied powers. To account for this, the Kriegsmarine had secretly identified merchant ships that they knew could be easily converted into deadly commerce raiders, and Steiermark was one of them. In early 1940, the ship was overhauled and turned into a fearsome hunter. By design, Steiermark was 164 metres long and 8,700 gross registered tonnes. She was powered by 4 9-cylinder diesel engines, providing a top speed of 18 knots, or 33 kilometres per hour. Originally, she had featured comfortable passenger cabins and cavernous cargo holds, but the cabins were gutted and replaced with bunks for sailors and gunners, while the cargo holds were converted to store naval mines and even prisoners, with separate lockups for both men and women if required. Crucially, though, the Hunter was given its teeth. On deck, she carried 2 15-centimetre naval guns, with 4 more below the forecastle and poop deck hidden behind hinged panels. The 2 guns on deck were hidden behind fake, collapsible cargo hatch walls that could be broken down in seconds. Behind sheet metal panels and on hydraulic mounts were 2-centimetre automatic anti-aircraft cannons and a pair of 3.7-centimetre light anti-tank guns that had been taken from the army. Devastating weaponry for any light targets, like the unarmoured merchant ships that Steiermark was expected to engage. On deck sat a pair of torpedo launchers with a single launcher underwater in the ship's hull on either side.
All right, those mobile torpedo launchers are an absolute game changer, bro.
Hell yeah, they are.
They can literally turn a small PT boat into a capital ship killer.
Yep.
The actual definition of a glass cannon.
And they are way easier to disguise than a deck gun.
That's true. That's true. Later, it gets easier to hide a deck gun. You can put a fake funnel over it, or you can put a fake a dish over it, and that's fine.
Yeah, which Cormoran did have one fake funnel, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of explains why they were so slow. But
yep.
Deep in the hold of the ship, she even carried an LS-3 fast motorboat and a pair of Arado AR-196 float planes for reconnaissance. High up above the bridge were disguised rangefinders that could direct the ship's gunfire with pinpoint accuracy.
Wow.
What emerged from the shipyard in September 1940 was a dangerous predator of a ship. Disguised as a friendly cargo ship, the Steiermark could drop its ruse and have its guns begin belching death in less than 10 seconds. She was a veritable floating Swiss Army knife of a ship, and she needed an able, adept commander to maximize her effectiveness. For this task, the Kriegsmarine chose 37-year-old Theodor Detmers, a former destroyer captain. It was often said that destroyer captains were a little bit mad, and indeed Detmers' determination and skill as a hunter would see him play the role of Steiermark's captain with devastating expertise.
Let's cover that for a minute, because that's one of the points that I want to make here about how this light cruiser approaches this ship. It does not approach it with any sense of freaking caution, really.
Nope.
Once she turns in to roll over there, she rolls in way too close, and that is the type of mentality a destroyer captain brings to the table. Their main gun points straight out in front of them.
Yeah, everything Sydney does right from the outset onward seems to take the other guy's word for it, that he really is a Dutch merchantman with a crew full of complete idiots who don't know how to hoist the flag signals. And
right.
And what a great feat of deception by Detmers and his crew.
Yeah, you can't reiterate that enough. I mean, this is probably like it's taught to this day. This particular battle is brought up on how to sucker an enemy. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
but
make him turn his strength into his weakness, and vice versa, and put himself in the position where you can destroy him.
The Sun Tzu would be proud.
Yep.
He'd be like, "Yep."
But first, he elected to give his ship a new name. The cormorant is a type of bird used by fishermen to catch and retrieve fish from rivers. The Allied merchant ships would be the fish, and Detmer's new raider would be the bird. He named her Cormoran. Provisioned for a year-long voyage, Cormoran's first job was to run the Allied blockade, and she escaped into the open ocean. Through December, she slipped by prowling British warships unnoticed in storms and heavy seas, way up over Iceland and through the Denmark Strait. It was a cautious move to take the long way around, but Detmers was calculating and cool, and he knew his ship would see action before long. In a fight with an Allied merchant ship or freighter, even one protected by a deck gun, Cormoran's heavy firepower would see her win every time. But an engagement with any warship bigger than a destroyer would see Cormoran destroyed. She had to rely on disguise and measured risk-taking to survive. Detmers began to hunt for merchant ships, travelling alone, without escort or in convoy. In January 1941, Cormoran claimed her first prize, sinking the Greek freighter Antonis. Later that month, Detmers engaged a British tanker, the British Union, which actually fired back when threatened. Cormoran's guns quickly disabled the ship, and her torpedoes sent it to the bottom of the ocean. For the next few months, Cormoran hunted ships like this in the Atlantic Ocean, sinking 8 for a total of 56,000 tons of Allied shipping. Cormoran was directed to hunt in the Indian Ocean, so...
Smoking otter, bro. That ain't rocket science. I guarantee you could knock up a decent torpedo in your shop at home. Using modern RC control stuff, yeah. Get you a 3D printer, we can do it. We can build you a dummy. It'll run over yonder and bump into the side of it. That's all it'll do.
And how much did everything change upon the invention of the torpedo? You know, in terms of the last 1,000 years of naval combat tactics, they were just totally upset by that one invention.
I mean, there is no comparable weapon system to it. There's nothing you can compare to it. It's like the difference between a sailing vessel and a trimarine.
It's just a little cheap weapon that if you get it on target, it can sink your biggest, most fanciest, expensive capital ship.
Right, and you can stick it on your $25 Johnson boat over yonder.
Yep.
You take $3,000 worth of explosives,
and so then you get that a whole period of a decades long periods of innovation in surface vessels that is just dealing with the invention of and the adaptation to the torpedo, because first you get torpedo boats whose job is to fire the torpedoes at bigger ships, and then you get the torpedo boat destroyer, which eventually they drop the torpedo boat part and it just gets called a destroyer. I mean, that's the whole reason the destroyer exists. It originated as a vessel that's supposed to destroy torpedo boats, and when you get into the carrier age, you know, you've got an entire halo of smaller surface vessels around your carrier, your 1 or 2 or 3 carriers, and much of their whole responsibility is interdicting any torpedoes that any adversary might fire at you.
Right. Your destroyers are in the initial. You're right. In the initial development of the destroyer, it was anti-torpedo boats, basically.
Yeah.
But because you have a forward platform, immediately upon the development of radar was slapped on that bad boy to go find ships further out. Right. Because we ain't got to see them. We just got to know where to drop the shells.
Yep.
Because the battleship can shoot over the top of an island if the range is right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, destroyers became a much more advanced platform for torpedoes, more than a hunt and kill smaller boats, but they were still always remained effective at the hunter killer aspect.
And really, in my opinion, once the torpedo became a factor in the equation, that's when the battleship became doomed as a capital ship, of your surface navy.
Yeah. And once they get in under the guns of like a battleship, small arms fire and your point defense weapons are less effective against a destroyer than you would think, because they don't have really armor. You just poke holes in them. Your only hope is to kill the crew or disable the engine.
A battleship can really only do one thing, and that's fire really big guns at a certain fairly limited range, and it needs an entire constellation of ships around it, just keeping it safe from things that are trying to kill it. And it didn't take long to figure out that the math doesn't pencil out anymore, to have a navy that's built around battleships. It's just dumbassery.
Well, it gets undone. The battleship gets undone by the aircraft carrier. Once the range goes beyond 15 miles, the aircraft carrier wins every single engagement.
Yeah, and the Japanese really underscore that point with the Pearl Harbor attack.
Right? Which, didn't they have 2 midget subs in the water that day?
Yeah. Yeah,
We-
and the sinking of one of the midget subs by one of our destroyers. I should remember the name, but I don't. I think that was the first shot fired on the day.
Yeah. It was the first action report written down. And when it was initially taken in, it was thought of as an oddity. They were like, a what? You saw a what? A little sub. A little sub? How little? Real little. Like small Japanese sub? No. Like somebody built it in their garage little.
Yeah, and that's depicted, if I'm not mistaken, in both of the Midway movies, the 76 picture and the 2019 picture.
Right. Well, I mean, it kind of needs to be.
Yeah, it's a pretty big part of the story.
All right, we're gonna let it roll.
Okay.
Detmers had his ship disguised as the Japanese freighter Kinkamaru. By November 1941, Cormoran had been at sea for 11 months, but pickings in the Indian Ocean were slim, and she'd sunk only 3 merchant ships since relocating in June. Detmers now had Cormoran disguised as a Dutch freighter, the Straat Malacca, and his ship had been frequently repaired and resupplied at sea, but he must have been frustrated by his lack of success in the Indian Ocean. To change tack, he turned his ship for Western Australia to lay mines off the coast and catch any unassuming Australian merchant ships by surprise closer to home. Late in the afternoon of November 19th, 1941, Cormoran was steaming about 280 kilometres off the coast of West Australia when a call came from his lookouts that a tall sailing ship had been spotted ahead on the horizon. But a few minutes later, the tangle of masts and rigging on the horizon revealed themselves to actually belong to an Allied warship. A warship which had spotted Cormoran and was approaching to investigate. Detmer's worst fears had been realised, and Cormoran would have to pull off a masterful disguise or be drawn into a gun battle that she was never designed for. Detmers grit his teeth and decided on what to do.
So, this is literally the only action this ship was built for.
Yep.
If anything had gone in any other direction, they would have been smoked, and Sydney would have rolled back to port to get repaired.
Yep. Yeah, there's only one way this thing can go from here on out to end up the way it wound up.
Yeah, and it has to go off flawlessly, and it's absolutely amazing that it worked. It's an absolute textbook case.
Aboard the bridge of HMAS Sydney, Captain Joseph Burnett peered through his binoculars at the mysterious ship in the distance. He was 41 years old, and Sydney was his first command. For his first ship, Burnett could have done a lot worse. Sydney was one of the finest, most modern warships in the Australian fleet. Australia still held close ties with Britain, and there was something of a codependency. Britain would supply and arm the Commonwealth, but expected Commonwealth assistance during wartime. Because of this, Australia's wartime fleet largely comprised second-hand Royal Navy warships. But Sydney was different. She had been purchased before completion by the Australian government. Originally, she was to have been named HMS Phaeton, but she and 2 of her sisters were sold to Australia and renamed. Phaeton became the Sydney. The ship was launched in 1934 as a Leander-class light cruiser. She had long, lean lines and powerful turbines, which gave her a top speed of 32.5 knots. Bow to stern, she was 171 metres long and displaced 7,200 tonnes. Sydney and her 2 sisters were different to the 5 other British Leander-class ships. They had 2 separate and self-contained boiler and engine room groups, a practice which was adopted from the US Navy. This meant that if one boiler and engine room was knocked out, Sydney could still operate with reduced speed. This changed her profile and gave the ship a second functioning funnel.
That is an absolutely beautiful ship, if I do say so myself. I mean, there is not an inch of wasted space on that deck nowhere.
Yeah, she's not a bad looking light cruiser.
Sydney was armed with 8 6-inch guns housed twinned in armoured turrets, which had a maximum range out to over 22.5 kilometres. The guns were quick firing, and although of a small caliber, they could lob shells downrange at a rate of once every 7 or 8 seconds. The forward turrets were designated A and B turret, and the rear turrets were X and Y. Amidships, Sydney carried 4 4-inch deck guns which could be used against aircraft or surface targets, while dotted around the ship were quad-mounted 13mm Vickers anti-aircraft guns. On either side of the ship was mounted a quadruple torpedo launcher. Sydney certainly did not want for armament. For reconnaissance duties, she carried a Supermarine Walrus seaplane on a catapult and was fitted with a massive crane so she could pluck the Walrus back out of the water after it was done with its mission. Sydney was nimble, quick, and deadly, designed to engage from a distance, kiting away from incoming enemy fire, but nipping back with her quick-firing 6-inch guns. Sailing from Britain, Sydney first arrived in Australia in July 1935, where she became an object of curiosity to the general public. In a peacetime navy through the rest of the 1930s, Sydney became a familiar sight in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and other Australian ports as she made regular voyages for exercises and training. To the Australian public, Sydney and her sisters, Perth and Hobart, were a source of pride.
There's a track winding back to an old fashioned shack along the road to
The nation was young and struggling to define its own national identity separate from Britain. Sydney and her sisters were up to standard as some of the world's finest fighting ships, and their crews were keen to show that they were up to standard as well.
where my daddy and mother are waiting for me, and the pals of my childhood once more I will see. Then no more will I.
That's a pretty good tune. I kind of dig it. I'm not gonna lie.
I love that tune. Yep, that's a good one.
What is it? What is that?
I don't think I know that it's one of those quintessential Australian the road to something or other.
Like Alamein or something? I don't remember. It's, the road to Brisbane. No, that's not right. What are there, like 4 cities in Australia? I'm sure we could just guess, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the answer.
Cool.
The outbreak of war saw Sydney patrolling Australian territorial waters and the Indian Ocean, but everything changed in May 1940 when she was ordered to join British warships in the Mediterranean Ocean. The ship was personally chosen by British Admiral Andrew Cunningham to join the 7th Cruiser Squadron, and he was impressed by the ship and decided to keep it for himself. With the declaration of war by Italy on June 10th, 1940, Sydney found itself on station in an active war zone, and her crew were anxious to do their nation proud. On the 21st of June, Sydney fired her guns in anger for the first time, bombarding the Italian-controlled port of Bardia. 7 days later, she engaged her first enemy ship, firing on the disabled Italian destroyer Espero and sinking her. Over the coming weeks, Sydney served with distinction, first at the Battle of Calabria and then at the Battle of Cape Sparta. This was her most glorious moment, the opportunity to earn the nation's pride that her eager crew had so long been looking for. On July 19th, a small force of British destroyers chanced upon a pair of Italian cruisers and retreated at speed, with the Italians in pursuit. The Italian captains were then horrified to see the Sydney appear, guns blazing on the horizon. The Italian ships turned to run, but Sydney's quick-firing 6-inch guns got to work, damaging the first and then disabling the second Italian cruiser, the Bartolomeo Colleoni. Sydney's crew were elated, never mind the fact that their ship had copped an Italian shell straight through the forward funnel. John Collins, her commander, was appointed a Companion of the Order of the Bath, while the ship's other officers and crew received a mix of 2 Distinguished Service Orders, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 5 Distinguished Service Medals, and 12 mentions and dispatches. Back home, Sydney was lauded as a hero, and the entire nation of Australia collectively beamed with pride. Sydney served in the Mediterranean until the end of 1940, when she received urgent news from home. German commerce raiders were prowling unhindered in the waters around Australia, and the island nation needed a guardian. Sydney was the perfect choice for such a task. By nature, thanks to her speed and rapid firepower, she was a hunter, and normally a commerce raider wouldn't stand a chance against her in a gun battle. Sydney arrived at her namesake port finally in February of 1941 to a hero's welcome. School children were even given a holiday to join the thousands and thousands of people who turned out to cheer the ship and her crew on.
You got to give them Aussies one thing: beautiful women and a decent beat.
Damn right. What did I say in the news roundup? I meant every word of it.
Yeah, no, I meant to hit that up during our allotted bantering time.
Sydney patrolled the waters of Australia, escorting convoys comprised of merchant ships and even massive ocean liners like the Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, and Aquitania. In November 1941, Sydney had been escorting the troop ship Zealandia off West Australia, but she was relieved on station and turned for home. Then, late in the afternoon of November 19th, smoke was spotted on the horizon. It was a lone merchant ship, and Burnett, Sydney's new captain, couldn't help but investigate. He turned his ship to pursue. On board the Cormoran, Detmers took only seconds to decide on what to do. He immediately ordered his ship be turned into the sun. That would make it harder for the enemy warship to see him and figure out its true identity.
And that should have been the immediate red flag.
Yeah, you think?
The very second he went off the course he had previously been following, when you're like, hey, who are y'all? And he goes, eh.
Yeah, because that's when you kind of lose your ability to claim you're just a dumb Dutch merchantman.
Right. You just did the most tactical possible move to take the best advantage of a tactical situation, but you're just a dumb merchantman.
Yep. I'm trying to get myself into a position where I can bring my guns into bear and you can't bring your guns, but I'm just some dummy here trying to figure out how to hoist a flag signal. Don't mind me.
Don't mind us. Ain't nobody here but us chickens.
The Dutch ensign was run up the foremast and Detmers called his crew to action stations. He knew that a gun battle at range would see his ship shot out from underneath him. He had to get the enemy close enough to exact a terrible, devastating blow, but to do this, he would need all his cunning and creativity. On his side was the element of surprise. The enemy warship was clearly interested in them, but turning to run away into the sun had only piqued that suspicion further. Cormoran was disguised as Straat Malacca, the Dutch freighter, so Detmers would use this false identity to lure the warship in as close as possible. He observed the distant warship through a sighting telescope of a gunnery control station. It was an Australian light cruiser making full speed for his ship, and the chase had begun. Cormoran struggled along at 14 knots, hampered by a malfunctioning engine and months of marine growth on the hull. But the Australian ship was getting closer and closer, nearly doubling the German ship's speed. Then came a challenge. The Australian ship flashed a Morse signal, NNJ, but nobody on Cormoran knew what this meant, so they didn't answer. Then
red flag number 2.
Yep.
What does that mean? I don't know. What do we do?
Play dumb. Sorry,
Nothing.
we're just a bunch of idiot Dutchmen over here. Can you speak up a little louder? We can't quite hear you.
Right? I didn't catch that.
Well, and what a great advantage it confers that you were still just barely living in the historical age where you can credibly say you don't have a radio or are incapable of wireless communication. You're gonna have to run up some flags. I'm sorry.
All right, boys, strap it together.
Give me a half hour to formulate my reply. Yeah, you can't do any of this shit if this is all on radio.
That's right. Yeah, you got to do it by Morse code or it don't fly. Your accent's going to throw it immediately. We are simply a Dutch.
We are Dutch. We are Dutch merchantmen. We don't know what you are doing. We don't want to be attacked.
I know nothing.
Then came another Morse signal. What ship? For this, Detmers had an answer and a plan. To buy himself time and lure the Australian ship closer within the range of his guns and torpedoes, Detmers ordered his signalman to reply to the question not with a Morse lamp, but slowly with signal flags one at a time.
There you go.
This was the appearance of an inexperienced, possibly scared civilian crew and would help sell Cormorant.
Can you imagine that conversation though? Cap, what do you want to do? Here, go run this up. That's a Caribbean flag, sir. Just do it.
Just do
All
it.
right, it's up there. No, take it down, run this one up. Sir, that says that you're going to be late for dinner. Run it up. Okay. Wait, no, take that one down and run.
This is a very sophisticated deception operation. Just do as you're told, young man.
I mean, like, can you imagine being the dude running the flags? He's like, they're fixing to blow our asses out of the water, right?
Yeah.
Any second. I can't do this. I'm getting you all murdered.
Yeah. And just make sure you do it badly so it helps sell the disguise.
No, you don't have to tell him that. He's so freaked out that he's the only person communicating with the other ship, and he's fixing to get shot as the target.
Son, it's very important that you do your job badly or we might all get killed.
I've been training for this all my life. This morning, and I've been high since noon. I've got you, Cap.
Cormoran's disguise even further. After a few minutes, Cormoran had signaled she was Strat Malacca, and Sydney was now only 15,000 meters away. Whenever Sydney asked a question, Cormoran's signalman would bumble, send up the wrong flag, seemingly on accident, and then take his time. But Sydney was getting impatient and began repeating its questions. At 4:30 p.m., Sydney was only 8,000 meters away and had quizzed Cormoran on where she was bound and what kind of cargo she was carrying. The mood on board Cormoran must have been incredibly tense, but so far, the ruse was working. On Sydney, Captain Burnett was playing a risky game. He had been briefed in depth on the presence of enemy commerce raiders operating in the Indian Ocean, and his standing orders advised against approaching mystery vessels at close range. Sydney's huge firepower advantage was most useful at long.
Yeah, no, that's another point right there. They were directly ordered, do not get too close to anything.
Yeah.
There were things like those little, what do you call them? Weird little rickshaw boat things that's got the straight motor out the back. I don't know. They were specifically worried that one of those little dinghy boats would be used as an explosive and then signal for help. And when you get close, they just blow it up. I'm not aware of that having happened, but they were actually cognizant of that possibility and was like, don't get close to anything. You shoot it or you sink it.
Yeah, and that's why this story becomes such an enduring mystery, because there is so much about the actions of Sydney and her captain that defy explanation, and you can't answer the question because she was lost with all hands. And that the disparity in the casualties is also what makes this such an enduring mystery, I think, because Sydney is lost with every single one of her 645 men. Cormoran only loses, 85 men out of a crew of 500, I believe? And
right.
How the hell does that happen?
You win. Like, amazing.
And everybody, all of the Cormoran survivors who get picked up, this is all fairly close to the west coast of Australia, so they all get taken back there and wind up being POWs for the remainder of the war, and they wind up being the only source of information you have about what the hell actually happened in this engagement. And, right. Eyewitness testimony is always imperfect, as we know.
All right. I'm going to back that up just a hair. That's the bit I was looking for. Okay, so the idea. All right, the Cormorant was not supposed to go anywhere near anything resembling a warship, and the only thing that made this happen was a twofold oopsie. One, they could not show how fast they could run, or they would give themselves up as not being a dopey merchantman, commerce raider. Commerce ship. So they couldn't turn on the gas and outrun the warship, which I think is what they should have done if they could have. The thing is I think the Sydney could just flat outstrip her. So this was the only tactic that might work. It's one of those, I've got an idea, but you're not going to like it moments.
Yeah, I've got an idea, and it's got a 1 in 1,000 chance of working, so let's do it.
Yeah, I've got a million ideas, and none of them will work, but this one might. And this is the way that this ship was supposed to operate against commerce, not
exactly, against unarmed merchant or barely armed merchant vessels. In other words,
well, in this time period, the merchant vessels are largely armed with old school like deck nines and stuff. Like literal muzzle loading black powder cannons, if they have any. They usually don't, because it's useless against modern shipping for the most part.
But your point is correct. I mean, the Captain Detmers in Cormoran, his number one order of engagement is don't get anywhere the hell near an enemy warship.
Yeah, no. And all I can figure is the what's up, William Freeman? Good to see you. All I can figure is the fog threw him off. The guy on deck wasn't watching, but it was like, oh shit, that's a warship. Turn into the sun immediately. Okay. And now pretend like you don't know what was it Han Solo said? Fly casually.
Fly casual, yeah.
Get out of here, but don't look like you're trying to get out of here. What do you mean? Fly casual.
It's an old code, but it checks out.
A coup for the commander, so closing the range and boarding her before her crew had a chance to plant explosive charges and deliberately sink their own ship seemed like a sound plan. As Sydney drew closer, Detmers noticed that all 4 of Sydney's main gun turrets were trained menacingly on his ship. He began to think like a civilian merchant ship captain. What would an inexperienced commander do in a situation like this? Well, probably panic. He ordered his radio operator to send the distress signal, Q, 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 the Royal Navy distress call for a ship suspecting it was under attack from a commerce raider. He gave his ship's name as Strat Malacca and his position, and he hoped that the signal, which he repeated, would cause serious confusion aboard the Australian warship. By now, Sydney was just 3,000 metres away. The Walrus seaplane on Sydney was run out with its engine on, but it didn't launch, and it just sat on the catapult. Detmers called into a speaking phone to his gunnery control crew. "Our camouflage is excellent," he said. "He has no suspicion. Maybe they will say good voyage and let us go." By 5:15, Sydney had drawn perfectly alongside Cormoran at point-blank range, just 900 metres away. Her guns were still trained on the ship, but her crew clearly weren't too concerned because through their looking glasses, the Germans could see Australian sailors and crewmen smoking and chatting idly on the deck. Detmers and his crew...
All right. So picture this. 5 Germans are standing on the deck with cigarettes, and the conversation taking place is, are they aiming at us? I don't know. I'm not going to look. Are you going to look? Yeah, I'm staring at them. All right. Are they aiming at us? Yes. Yes.
Smoke casual.
Don't look like you're trying to smoke casual, though. You mean like one of those French films? Yeah, like one of those French films.
Smoke like you're an innocent Dutchman who hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah, no. And how do they decide what to wear? I mean, are they prepared for this specific type of situation? Are they dressed up as Dutch people, or did they choose to fly a Dutch flag?
That's an outstanding question. Like what depth of inspection are they prepared to undergo exactly?
Right. I mean, it's obviously all supposed to be surface, but then again, how surface are we talking? Are we talking 300 meters? Or are we talking, boarding crew?
Yeah, because it seems like at one point, shortly before the shooting started, they had closed the distance to a point where it would have been really easy to take a pair of binoculars and see what the guys on the other deck looked like and what they were up to and how they were dressed and whatnot.
Right. And they did. They observed them quite closely. Now, there was fog, but all they could really tell, I guess, is that there were people up there, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, but that is close range, man.
It's ridiculous.
"Do we know the secret call for the Strat Malacca?" he asked. In response, the officer just shook his head. Detmers realized that the time had come, and he gave his orders. The disguise would be dropped. Up the masthead shot the battle ensign of Nazi Germany, and then all hell broke loose.
And it was at this moment he realized he fucked up.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time.
Like the captain's standing there with some of them big old huge admiral glasses because it's like a construction site. The person with the biggest tape measure is the one in charge. But the person on the boat with the biggest spyglass is the one in charge. So he's standing there with his super admiral, like Grand Admiral spyglasses, and he sees that panel drop down and them torpedoes turn and all the funnels turn and point at him, and it's like, oh.
Yep, that is the moment where he realizes, shit, I hope I live through this, and if I do, I will no longer be the captain of my country's flagship.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I tend to think that the very second he realized that he realized this is an enemy, he also realized they're under my guns.
Yep.
They're
and what a shit your pants moment that has to be right there.
I guarantee you everyone on that bridge pissed themselves, because at this point they were expecting to just like state trooper this guy. Y'all need to learn the proper command codes and y'all be perfectly safe out here, and we'd take care of you. Now go back to port and tell them what you did.
I've screwed the pooch so badly that he can shoot me and I can't shoot him.
The only gun on the deck that can actually put bullets in that ship are the aircraft guns, and it's only at the beginning of the engagement. Immediately after the beginning, they turn in together, and he gets under those, and that's the end. That's the very.
But you have rendered your main battery and your secondary battery totally useless,
and full point defense protection as well. None of the deck guns could get down low enough to get them.
No,
absolute devastation.
Fire!
Two shots from Cormoran's 15-centimeter guns missed, and Sydney answered with a full broadside salvo. The ships were so close together that Sydney's guns were not depressed low enough and the shells passed close overhead. But if Cormoran's 15-centimeter guns had proved ineffective so far, the 20mm anti-aircraft guns and the 3.7-centimeter anti-tank guns were doing devastating work. The Australian crew, who had been idle on the deck just moments before, now found themselves cut down by heavy anti-aircraft gun fire. The two ships were so close that the 3.7-centimeter guns easily penetrated Sydney's thin superstructure. Their first priority target was the bridge. Captain Burnett's surprise and horror must have been total, but it couldn't have lasted long because Cormoran's gunfire raked the bridge where Burnett stood and turned it into bloody ruin.
And that makes a big damn difference, too, when your second salvo takes out the enemy bridge and all the command crew.
That was totally by design. This is another point. Remember, the Cormorant has a disguised bridge. Their bridge looks like a container or something.
And the German gunnery here is absolutely immaculate.
It's amazing.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing.
Then Cormoran's 15-centimeter guns found their range and hammered Sydney stem to stern with heavy shelling, finishing off in the bridge what the anti-aircraft and anti-tank guns had started. The damage was severe. Sydney had been caught completely by surprise. It had only been 20 seconds since Cormoran's first shot, but Sydney's commander and most of her senior officers were already likely dead. Cormoran's 15-centimeter gun...
All right, so this goes further. Once you take out the bridge crew, you take out almost all, not only your command and control, but also your damage repair and all of your emergency response breaks.
Yep.
Right there.
Yeah, you've got a half a dozen different chains of command that are broken.
And their supplementals were probably heavily damaged in the first few seconds too, because that anti-aircraft gun is unreal, dude. It is unreal.
And then it might take you 2 or 3 minutes at that point even to figure out who is now in command of each individual thing.
Imagine being like B string on your second shift or whatever, and you're supposed to come in a couple hours and take over, but the battle just started. You're in your rack and you're laying there, and the first thing you know that something's going on is a really big boom and holes coming through the side of the freaking ship. You see daylight. You're not supposed to see daylight, and you see daylight, and it's like, ah! That's the worstest. That's as bad as seeing daylight in a freaking spaceship. That's not good.
No,
Holes don't float.
It's true.
Effective, and they silenced Sydney's forward A and B turrets, which only ever got to fire that first high salvo. The Supermarine Walrus seaplane, still waiting with its engine turning on the catapult, received a direct hit and exploded, spilling aviation fuel all over the decks and starting a raging fire. Meanwhile, Cormoran's 20mm anti-aircraft guns blasted away, keeping Sydney's men from reaching the exposed torpedo mounts and 4-inch guns. Sydney had been silent since that first salvo and was now burning fiercely, but then X and Y turret burst into life again and lobbed shells at Cormoran. Sydney's main fire control station had been knocked out, so the crew in X and Y turrets had to just judge for themselves the range and firing angle. And incredibly, X...
Yeah.
A little bit up, a little left. All right, Jethro, hit it. I hope you got Sergeant York on that boat.
Yeah, no more fire control, boys. Just eyeball it. And then we saw the thing we were just talking about, that Sydney sat silent and didn't do a damn thing for 2 or 3 minutes after the bridge strike, because that's how long it takes to figure out, okay, everybody's dead. Who the hell's giving the orders now?
At that point, it would be surprising if anyone did survive this particular battle, because it is in no way in the Cormorant's best interest to leave survivors. This is a war crime. If they hadn't struck their colors just right, and we only have their word that they did.
It's true. It's true. You raise a valid point. We only have their word that they did.
The after action report was entirely taken from the Cormorant. So,
645 men and not a single one is plucked from the water alive. I mean, how improbable is that?
Very well. I mean, not terribly improbable on a case by case basis, given where they were and what.
But then isn't it made improbable by the fact that this is an engagement where both vessels wound up being sunk, and the death rate on one side is 100%, and on the other side it's 10. I mean, how often do you get a disparity like that in a naval battle? It's
apparently when you have anti-aircraft on a ship too close for comfort,
and it's not difficult to understand. I don't think why this thing has wound up breeding so many wild conspiracy theories, because this is exactly the kind of story that does that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many, like this supposedly well-trained light cruiser captain who was ordered to stay no closer than 3 kilometers away from anything on Earth big enough to hide a gun. Floating flotsam was supposed to be avoided.
It's the flagship of the fleet, and the Australians are a seafaring people. I mean, they are the heirs and descendants of a seafaring people. And yet you have the flagship of their fleet just doing things that are inexplicably contrary to what they should be doing, and because nobody survives except on the other side, you have no explanation for why any of it happens. Which is
not even the fog can explain any of it, really, because in that case, both of them should have avoided each other.
Ultimately.
Go the fuck away. I don't know. Maybe I'm just dense, but I don't see anything here that the Sydney did.
Oh yeah, from the perspective of each of the respective captains, it probably was the prudent choice for both of them to just turn the other way and not engage, or not even encounter.
I mean, yeah. Because a non-event is better than the loss they suffered by.
Especially Detmers. He has no business winning that encounter at all.
Yeah. Absolute boss tier. Yeah, no. Let's go.
Turret found their mark, and a shell tore straight through Cormoran's funnel. More shells landed on Cormoran's hull, the engine room, the gun stations, and then the electrical
did have
plant,
Sergeant
cutting off
York.
supply for the ship's main generators. Incredibly, these two modern warships were now sailing side by side at point-blank range, exchanging gunshots like a pair of 17th century galleons.
The term broadside was used euphemistically during the Second World War. It wasn't a legitimate thing that could actually happen in most circumstances. Encounters took place at, much further distances, so that the term broadside was used kind of loosely and sort of jokingly. Broadside.
Yeah.
Sydney's two remaining gun turrets fired on, the only defence the ship now had against this surprise enemy. But then there was an enormous explosion, and Sydney trembled in the water. Detmers had fired a spread of torpedoes at the warship early in the engagement. One had now hit on the warship's bow, a devastating blow that almost submerged the bow of the ship through its sheer force. Just 2 minutes into the engagement, and Sydney was now mortally wounded. Her bow down in the water, the heroic cruiser now peeled pathetically off to port, but whether this was a deliberate attempt to ram Cormoran or just an uncontrolled turn remains unclear. The turn opened Sydney's starboard side up to Cormoran's guns, and they raked her from stem to stern as she passed by. Sydney's A and B turrets exploded as they were hit by multiple 15-centimetre shells. By now, Sydney was just limping along at 5 knots, with X and Y turret pointing in the wrong direction. They had no answer to Cormoran's fire. Detmers wanted to close the range again, which had now increased to 4,000 metres, so he could finish the cruiser off. But Cormoran's engine revolutions were falling, and his attempts to raise the engine room via telephone from the bridge.
So that one shell they were capable of putting in there did 80% of the damage that was done to the ship.
Yeah. And it really comes down to that second salvo from the main battery that takes out
Right.
the bridge and the command and control, and that torpedo hit. Those are the two things that do it. And that's another mystery, is how does Sydney never get any torpedoes off?
Yeah, really. Well, 2 minutes, man. 2 minutes. From oh shit to get wrecked. 2 minutes.
Yeah. And there clearly is a point here, which we just witnessed and went past, where in terms of navigationally, Sydney is no longer really under anyone's control. But the only units that are still functioning are the gun crews.
Right. And they're completely by sight.
Yeah. They've got no more fire control. They're just trying to eyeball the damn thing.
Absolutely.
Failed. He got no response because the engineers had most likely all been killed. For most ships, a hit to the funnel would be purely cosmetic and be no cause for concern. But Cormoran employed a complex system of piping within the funnel, which carried fuel oil up to be heated before being pumped back down into the boilers. This was more efficient for her engines, but it also meant that Sydney's hit on the funnel sent a cascading fountain of burning fuel oil back down into the Raiders' boiler and engine rooms, incinerating the men on watch and rendering the engine rooms useless. Cormoran began to vibrate as her engine revolutions raced out of control, but her gun crews continued to hammer Sydney at range. Finally, at 6:25, just 55 minutes since battle had broken out, Cormoran ceased fire at a range of 10,400 metres. Detmers knew that the battle was won, but now he had to tend to his wounded ship.
Yet again, we only have the Cormorant's crew's word that this is the sequence of event.
Yep.
Although they did all seem to pretty well agree.
Yeah, and it does nothing but deepen the mystery, though. When when you only have one side's story to go on, it just comes with the territory.
Well, considering this, that you would have had at least 1/3 of that crew in rack, probably 1/3 of that crew in the mess hall, and the other third on duty, you're looking at 2/3 of them being off their battle positions, and the on-duty crew, they obviously were not expecting any of it. It worked so flawlessly. It's amazing.
Yeah, you couldn't draw it up any better.
And in fact,
but
that's one of the issues with the story is that it is so flawless.
yeah, which makes you wonder how much embellishment has happened since we only have, people from one side who might have a vested interest in telling a self-serving version of events.
Heroes, everyone. Absolutely.
But that would be another fascinating thing to know that we don't know, which is the question of when Sydney actually went down, how many people were still alive then? How many people hadn't been killed outright by the salvo that took out the bridge, or the torpedo that took out the navigation? Dude,
well, those Vickers, man, those Vickers are absolute man killers when you go ship to ship, because they can penetrate. First of all, the ship's not technically armored, and that's not technically small arms fire, so it's just raking the decks.
Oh yeah, and you can hide that thing just behind a little fake bulkhead that you can just drop down whenever you need to.
Let's get them, boys. All right, so you want to have a conversation about Ahsoka. Is it as bad as I think?
It is the girl power, girl bossiest female empowerment show that I've. There was one point, I think it was during, I want to say, episode 3, where I thought, I think it's been at least a full episode since a male character actually said a line. Maybe that was just me.
I stopped watching, like I said, about halfway through the second episode, I think, when Home Chick climbed out on the outside of the ship with her rave sticks and started knocking down starfighters with turbo laser, turbo blaster. That dude, I'm sorry. I'd rather wash dishes.
And I should say, I guess, to preemptively counter the criticisms that we always get from certain people, that I wouldn't even have a problem with a story that was female centric and all about girls and whatever. That would be fine. Just make it a compelling story and maybe make the girls nice to look at. I don't think that's asking a whole hell of a lot, because it seems like we don't get either one. We don't get a compelling story or girls who are fun to look at. We just get girls who look like 10-year-old boys and shitty stories.
Or beached whales with purple hair.
Or beached purple-haired land whales.
I'm so and I'm an ice age mammal, bro. Like, I'm perfectly down with the big girls. Have I ever explained my dating quotient to you?
Go ahead.
All right. Let me do this properly. I'm sorry, bro. Sasquatch has a dating profile that goes like this. A 1 dart date is anyone under 150 pounds. Anyone. Tall or small. 2 dart date is anyone under 200 pounds. A 3 dart date. Oh, what's that? Why do I say darts? Well, that's how many it takes to put them down. I'll put a little bit of bacon grease behind one ear, a little bit of maple syrup behind the other ear, and I go to the bar and lean over that fat girl and I say, "What do you want for breakfast, honey? Because I know you're coming home with me."
If I had a little rim shot push button effect, I would have given it to you right there, brother.
I'm not a stand-up comic, but I'll play one on YouTube.
Well, I think we both play one better than actual stand-up comics, because actual stand-up comics suck.
All right, dude.
That's why we sit the fuck down.
Right. You know why a stand-up comic does his work standing up? So he can run away if he offends too many people.
That was did you read about the incident at the Dave Chappelle show the other night?
Did I miss something? Oh my God, I missed some pop culture. Fix me immediately.
Yeah, he apparently decided it would be a good idea to go on a big pro-Hamas rant, which came as a bit of a surprise. And so
Really? No.
Evidently, a bunch of Jewish audience members didn't like that very much, and made their way toward the exits and posted their displeasure on social media, as people are wont to do in such times.
Right. It's their right. They've got their voice. Let them do it. You know, it's kind of funny.
I'm surprised to hear that coming from Dave Chappelle. I wonder if that's I wonder if that's something calculated.
Are you though? Are you really? Come on, man. Go look at his comedy. I suspect if he's not a socialist, if he's not a hardcore communist, he's probably a socialist.
Yeah, I know. And you raise a valid point, and oftentimes we need to just acknowledge that most people are low information, and they just go on what they've heard and form their worldview accordingly. And as foreign and alien as that is to those of us who are normal people who like to use the brains in our heads, that we still have to confront the fact that most people are in the other group and not the one that we're in.
Right. All right. Do your thing, bud. It's time to go.
It's time to go. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on the Blast Radius. We do the same thing here every Sunday night, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Please join us next weekend and every upcoming weekend. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. Till next time, do not comply. Get off my lawn.
3, 2, 1, 0.
You cannot subvert an enemy which doesn't want to be subverted. Subversion is the term, if you look in a dictionary or criminal code to that matter, usually is explained as a part of activity to destroy things like religion, government system, political, economical system of a country. Starting from Hollywood movie makers to professors of political science and quote-unquote experts on Soviet affairs, Kremlinologists as they call themselves. No James Bond nonsense. The rest, 85%, is always subversion, manipulation of terms. We think that subverter is a person who is going to blow up our beautiful bridges. But according to the law and law enforcement systems of the Western civilization, it's not a crime. Subversion can be only successful when the agent of subversion has a responsive target. Subverter is a student who comes for exchange, a diplomat, an actor, an artist, a journalist like myself. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate